The desert sun blazed mercilessly over Fort Irwin, California. In the middle of the test field stood a silent giant, a 70-ton M1 Abrams tank, once the pride of the U.S. Army. Now, it sat lifeless, its engine cold, its systems dead, and its future uncertain. For weeks, teams of highly trained engineers had worked around the clock, trying to revive it. But no matter what they did, the tank refused to move an inch. It wasn't just any tank. This particular Abrams had a history. It had survived 2 tours in Iraq, had been hit by RPG fire, and still rolled through the desert like a beast of steel. It was supposed to be the centerpiece of a new training program, but now, it had become an embarrassment. Major David Collins, head of the engineering team, wiped the sweat from his brow and slammed his wrench onto the ground. "Sir, we've tried everything. The control modules, the turbine, the hydraulics, all checked, all replaced. Nothing." General Marcus Hayes, a stern but fair man in his late 50s, stood silently, his arms crossed. He stared at the motionless Abrams with a heavy heart. That tank wasn't just a machine to him, it was a symbol of American engineering, strength, and pride. Hayes finally turned to his team. "Gentlemen, I don't want excuses. I want that Abrams moving. We've got a demonstration in 2 days. Find a way." But deep down, even he knew, they were out of options. That evening, as the desert wind howled across the base, General Hayes sat alone in his office, staring at old photos on the wall. One photo caught his attention, a group of soldiers standing proudly next to a tank in the early 2000s. Among them was a younger version of himself, and next to him stood a broad-shouldered man with oil-stained hands and a mischievous grin, Sergeant Frank Steele Donovan. Donovan had been a legend in the Armored Corps, a tank mechanic who could bring a dead Abrams back to life with little more than a wrench and intuition. But after a serious injury in 2006, he was discharged and slowly faded into obscurity. No one had heard from him in years. Hayes leaned back, thinking hard. Then he picked up the phone. "Get me Sergeant Donovan's last known contact," he ordered. The next morning, a dusty old pickup truck rolled through the gates of Fort Irwin. Out stepped a man in his late 60s, with a weathered face, a gray beard, and eyes that had seen both war and loss. He wore a faded army cap, oil-stained jeans, and an old jacket with a patch that read, 3rd Armored Division, Iron Spear. The young engineers stared at him curiously. "Who's that?" one whispered. General Hayes smiled slightly. "That, son, is the man who taught most of your instructors what a real tank whisperer looks like." Frank Donovan approached the silent Abrams, running his hand gently along its steel hull. "Still the same old beast," he murmured. "You've been through hell, haven't you, girl?" Major Collins frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, this thing's a total system failure. We've already replaced everything that could be replaced." Donovan chuckled. "That's the problem. You replaced what was broken. But you never listened to what she was saying." For the next few hours, Donovan worked quietly. No fancy tools, no computer diagnostics, just his ear, his instincts, and his experience. He opened up access panels, tapped on parts, listened to faint echoes inside the metal. Every move seemed slow but deliberate. Finally, he asked for something odd. "Bring me the old wiring harness you took out." Collins hesitated. "We scrapped that, it was burnt out." "Not all of it," Donovan said firmly. "Find it." When they brought it, Donovan took one look and smirked. "There's your problem. This harness wasn't faulty, it was miswired when replaced. You've been running power into a feedback loop that kills the startup sequence." The engineers stared at him, speechless. Donovan rolled up his sleeves. "Let's fix her the old-fashioned way." By sunset, the air was thick with tension. Donovan sat inside the tank, surrounded by a few young engineers watching every move. He turned the ignition key, and the tank groaned, coughed, then fell silent. Everyone held their breath. He adjusted a small valve and muttered, "Come on, sweetheart, I know you've got one more fight left in you." He turned the key again. This time, a deep, thunderous roar shook the ground. The turbine came to life, spitting heat and dust into the desert air. The Abrams was alive. The young engineers jumped back, stunned. Donovan grinned, eyes gleaming under the glow of the control lights. "Told you she just needed someone to listen." General Hayes stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome back, Steele." That night, the tank roared across the test field under the desert stars. Donovan stood next to General Hayes, watching it move like a resurrected warrior. You could have retired quietly, Hayes said softly. I tried, Donovan replied. But you can't retire from what you love. These machines, they're part of who we are. Hayes nodded. We need more men like you. The young ones, they've got knowledge. But they've lost the feel. Maybe you can teach them. Donovan smiled faintly. I'd like that. One last mission, to remind them that heart and hands matter as much as software and screens. Weeks later, a new training division was born at Fort Irwin, the Donovan program, where young engineers learned the art of listening to machines, combining modern technology with the wisdom of experience. And in the corner of the hangar sat the resurrected M1 Abrams, now known officially as Steel Spirit. Every time it roared to life, its thunder reminded everyone that experience never truly gets old, it only gets louder.